The moment I realized my car was gone, I was standing in the Kroger parking lot with a 22-pound baby on my hip, a reusable bag cutting into my forearm, and 104 degrees of Arizona sun turning the asphalt into something that felt personal. I want to back up. My sister-in-law, Tiffany, my husband's younger sister, had been staying with us for 6 weeks. That was the arrangement. 6 weeks while she got back on her feet after her lease ended in Tempe. My husband, Connor, had asked me about it the way he asked me about most things involving his family. Not really a question, more of an announcement with a pause at the end where I was supposed to say, of course. I said, of course. His mother, Gloria, lived 40 minutes away in Scottsdale but treated our house like a second residence. She had opinions about where I kept the dishes, opinions about how I folded Connor's shirts, opinions about the fact that I used store-brand detergent and not the one she'd been buying him since he was 12. She was not a cruel woman in the loud, obvious way. She was the kind of woman who said things sweetly and then looked at you just a half-second too long, waiting to see if the sting landed. Tiffany was 24. She was not mean either, exactly. She was just 24, unemployed, and had decided somewhere along the way that the normal rules of living in someone else's house didn't apply to her. Our daughter, Maisie, was 14 months old. She had started walking 3 weeks before all of this happened, and she was still at that stage where every step was a commitment, and falling down was more interesting than staying upright. I was on maternity leave that had technically ended, working part-time from home doing contract bookkeeping, trying to make a client deadline while Tiffany watched reality TV in the living room at a volume that I could hear through closed doors and noise-canceling headphones. That Tuesday morning, Connor left early for work. I asked him before he left if he could please remind Tiffany about the shared calendar system I had put together for the house. Nothing complicated, just a Google Calendar where we marked if we needed a car, if we had plans, if someone needed to be home by a certain time. Connor said he would. He did not. I had a grocery run planned, just an in-and-out trip, formula, some produce, sandwich stuff, diapers. I put Maisie in the car seat, buckled everything, came back inside to grab my phone off the charger, and when I walked back out to the driveway, my car was not there. I stood on the front step for a full 6 seconds just looking at the spot where it had been. A gray 2022 Honda CR-V that I had put the down payment on with money from my own savings account before Connor and I were even engaged. My name, first and only, on the title. I went inside. Tiffany's room. The guest room door was open. Her stuff was still there. Her shoes by the door. Her charger on the kitchen counter. I texted her. No response. I texted Connor. He responded immediately. Oh, Mom needed to run some errands, and Tiffany offered to drive her. They probably just took yours because it has the better AC. I read that message 3 times. I called him. He answered on the second ring. Connor, they took my car. It's just for a few hours, babe, without asking me. I mean, you were putting Maisie down for her nap probably. They didn't want to bother you. I had not been putting Maisie down for a nap. Maisie was awake and had been buckled into her car seat in the driveway when they apparently walked past her, walked past me, and took my keys off the hook by the door. I said that. He said I was probably confused about the timeline. I was not confused. But I was standing in my kitchen with a 14-month-old on my hip and nowhere to go, so I told him to please have them back by noon because I had to get groceries and get back for a 2 p.m. call with a client. He said okay. He said he'd pass it along. At 11:50, I texted Tiffany again. Nothing. At 12:15, I called Gloria's cell. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. Polite. Very polite. Hey, Gloria. Just checking in. I have a call at 2, and I need to get to the store. Any idea when you'll be heading back this way? At 12:45, I texted Connor again. He said they were still out. I made a decision that I am not entirely proud of in terms of judgment, but am still at peace with given the circumstances. I put Maisie in the stroller, packed the diaper bag, and walked to the Kroger that was 7/10 of a mile away. I know the exact distance because I looked it up afterward, the way you do when you want to have a number to point to. 7/10 of a mile. 104 degrees. Maisie had her sun hat. I had a water bottle. It was not a crisis. It was a lot. I got to Kroger. I got the things I needed. I was standing at the register when my phone, which was at 11% battery, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Gloria. Honey, we ended up stopping for lunch, and then Tiffany wanted to run into Target. We'll be back around 4. Make sure Connor knows. Hope your day is going well. 4 o'clock. I put my phone in my pocket. I paid for the groceries. I put Maisie back in the stroller and I stood just outside the sliding doors of the Kroger in the shade of the awning and I thought about what I was going to do. I called Connor. He didn't answer. I called again. He answered this time, and he sounded slightly annoyed in that way he had when I was interrupting something. They're not coming back until 4, I said. I know, Mom just texted me too. Connor. I walked here. I'm at the Kroger. It's 104 degrees and I have Maisie and I have groceries and they are not coming back for 3 hours? There was a pause. Can you get an Uber? I want to tell you that I responded with maturity and grace. I did not. I said something short and sharp that I will not repeat here, and then I hung up. My phone died 40 seconds later. The Kroger had a phone charging station near the customer service desk. I plugged in, waited 4 minutes to get enough battery to turn back on, and then I called my dad. My father's name is Ray. He is 61 years old. He spent 30 years in HVAC, and his hands look like it, and he is the kind of man who hears exactly what you're not saying. I didn't even finish telling him where I was before he said, "Stay put. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming." He was there in 17 minutes. He pulled up in his truck, and I was sitting on the bench outside with Maisie asleep in the stroller, the grocery bags at my feet, still wearing the same thin shirt I'd put on at 9 in the morning because I had expected to be home by noon. He got out of the truck. He looked at me. He looked at Maisie. He looked at the stroller, the bags, the sweat on my hairline. "Where's your car?" he said. I told him. He didn't say anything for a moment. He helped me fold up the stroller and load the groceries into the bed of the truck. He got Maisie buckled into the backup car seat I kept in his truck for exactly this kind of reason. Then he got into the driver's seat, put the truck in reverse, and said, "I'm coming inside with you." It wasn't a question. We got home at 2:08. I missed my client call by 8 minutes. I sent an apology email and asked to reschedule, which was embarrassing, and the client was understanding, which made me feel worse somehow. My dad sat at my kitchen table and drank a glass of water and didn't say anything inflammatory. He just waited. Gloria and Tiffany got back at 4:22. I heard my garage door, go up, and then the sound of my car pulling in. I heard them laughing at something, heard the doors close, heard the beep of the locks. They came inside through the door that led from the garage to the kitchen, and Tiffany was carrying a Target bag and Gloria had a Cheesecake Factory to-go box, and they both stopped when they saw my dad sitting at the table. "Ray," Gloria said. She said it the way you say the name of someone you're surprised to see but are trying to appear delighted by. "Gloria," my dad said. He didn't stand up. There was a beat of silence. Tiffany looked at me. I looked at her. "We brought back dinner," Gloria said, holding up the Cheesecake Factory box toward me like a peace offering she hadn't decided she needed until just that second. "Why did you take her car?" my dad said. Gloria set the box down. "We just needed to run a few errands without asking her." Connor knew. Connor didn't ask her either. My dad's voice was even, not loud, even, like something that has decided not to move. "She walked to the grocery store in 104 degrees with a 1-year-old because you took her car and didn't answer your phone." I texted at 12:45, I said. I hadn't planned to speak. It came out. I'd already been to the store and back by then. Gloria's face did something complicated. The pleasant look she always wore rearranged itself, briefly, into something less pleasant, and then she composed it again. "I think we just had a miscommunication. Where's Connor?" my dad asked. "He's not home yet," I said. My dad nodded like that was information he had already accounted for. "I'm going to wait," he said. Gloria looked at him. He looked back. She picked up the Cheesecake Factory box and took it to the refrigerator, and Tiffany disappeared down the hall to the guest room, and my dad and I sat at the kitchen table and I put Maisie in her high chair with some crackers and we waited. Connor got home at 5:55. I heard his car and heard the door and heard him stop when he walked into the kitchen and saw my dad. "Hey, Ray," he said with the careful cheer of someone who knows something is wrong. "Sit down," my dad said. Connor sat. What happened over the next 40 minutes was not a screaming match. I want to be clear about that. My dad is not a screaming match kind of person. It was more like a very slow, very deliberate unspooling of every polite excuse Connor tried to offer. Connor said they didn't think I needed the car. My dad asked if anyone had asked me. Connor said it was just a miscommunication. My dad asked whose miscommunication exactly. Connor said his mom hadn't meant anything by it. My dad said intent and impact were two different things, and what was the impact? He made Connor say it. He sat there and waited until Connor actually said out loud, "She walked to the store in 100-degree heat with the baby because she had no other option." And your response, my dad said, when she called you, was to suggest she get an Uber. Connor didn't have anything to say to that. Gloria had come into the kitchen at some point. She was standing by the counter with her arms crossed, not quite entering the conversation, not quite leaving it. "I want to be very clear," my dad said, looking at Connor and then at Gloria, "about whose car that is. It is in her name. She put down the money on it before you were married. That is not a family vehicle. That is her vehicle. And what happened today? Taking it without asking, being unreachable for hours, leaving her stranded with an infant in this heat, that is not a miscommunication. That is a lack of respect." "I think you're being a little," Gloria started. "I'm not done," my dad said. She stopped. "Tiffany has been here 6 weeks. The arrangement was 6 weeks. I'd like to know what the plan is from here." Connor looked at the table. "She's still looking for a place. That's not a plan," my dad said. "That's an update." He looked at me then. Not at Connor, not at Gloria. At me. "What do you need?" he said. And I don't know exactly why that question after all of it was the one that almost made me cry. Maybe because it was simple. Maybe because it was the first time anyone had asked. I told him I needed things to be different. I told him, and I said this to Connor directly, which was hard, because saying hard things to your husband in front of your father and your mother-in-law is one of the most uncomfortable positions a person can be in. I told him that I needed him to understand that his family being in our home meant they were guests, that guests did not take things that belonged to me without asking, that if something like this happened again, I would be making decisions about who was and wasn't allowed in our home, and I would be making them without his input. Connor looked like I'd said something in a language he didn't recognize. Gloria said, "I really don't think that's necessary." "She's not talking to you," my dad said. Quietly, pleasantly. "She's talking to her husband." The room was very still. What I want to tell you is that everything got fixed that evening. That Connor had some kind of awakening over dinner and became a different person by bedtime. That Gloria apologized sincerely and Tiffany found an apartment the next week and everything got clean and resolved. It didn't happen exactly like that. Connor was quiet for 3 days. Defensive quiet, the kind where you can feel them building a case internally. Gloria texted me the next morning a message that said, "I'm sorry if you felt disrespected," which, if you're not familiar, is the grammatical construction of someone apologizing for your feelings rather than their actions. I did not respond. Tiffany stayed for 2 more weeks. Not 6 more, 2. Because I sat down with Connor on day 4, when the quiet had stretched long enough, and I told him clearly that I needed a move-out date. A real one. On the calendar. Not a general intention. He gave me one. She moved out on a Saturday. Connor helped her. I stayed home with Maisie and felt something unknot in my chest when I heard the front door close for the last time that afternoon. Gloria still comes over. She is not a different person. She still has opinions about my dish placement and my detergent, and sometimes I think she says things that are designed to land in a certain way. But she has not touched my keys. She has not touched my keys. She has not taken my car. She has not, since that afternoon, done anything that required my dad to sit at my kitchen table and wait. I think she understood something that day that she hadn't before. I'm not sure she'll ever say it out loud, and I have stopped waiting for her to. But she looked at my dad sitting there. Not angry, not loud, just steady and absolutely immovable. And she understood that there was a line and that she had crossed it and that the people who loved me had noticed. Connor and I have been in couples counseling since March. It was my condition. Not an ultimatum exactly. I want to be honest about that. But it was a line I drew, and he stepped over it in the right direction, which is more than I knew to hope for on the afternoon I walked home from Kroger in the heat with my daughter on my hip and 4 bags of groceries pulling at my arms. My dad, when I called him to tell him Connor had agreed to counseling, said, "Good. Now what do you want for dinner?" "I'm making ribs." That's him. That's exactly him. Maisie is 19 months now. She runs everywhere. She thinks falling down is still hilarious. Last week, she climbed into the driver's seat of my car while I was getting her sun hat from the back seat, wrapped her tiny hands around the steering wheel, and looked at me like she owned the whole road. She does not get that from her father. I've thought about that walk a lot since then. Not in a dramatic way. I'm not someone who replays things over and over looking for the moment everything went wrong. But sometimes, when I'm buckling Maisie into her car seat and she's grabbing at the straps the way she does, I think about what it took to get here. To get to a place where I can say clearly, that was not okay. And I am not going to pretend it was. What happened with Gloria and Connor didn't start the day she took my car. It started long before that, in all the small moments I let fly because I didn't want to cause friction. Every time I said, "of course," when I meant I'd rather not. Every time I swallowed something that deserved to be said out loud. I don't say that to beat myself up about it. I say it because I think that's how these things actually work. Not one explosion. A slow accumulation of small surrenders until one day you're standing outside a Kroger in 104 degrees with a dead phone and a sleeping baby, and you realize the situation you are in did not appear out of nowhere. You built a door that was always unlocked, and you're surprised people kept walking through it. That's not a judgment. That's just cause and effect. I made it easy to be disrespected, and so it continued. And when I made it harder, when I sat at that table and said out loud to Connor's face that things were going to be different, they started to become different. Not immediately, not cleanly, but the direction changed. My dad didn't fix anything that afternoon. I want to be honest about that. He sat at my table. He asked hard questions. He made Connor say out loud what he'd done. But the actual work, the counseling, the conversations, the night I finally told Connor that I needed him to choose his wife over his comfort, that was mine. Ray showed up, the way good fathers do, but he couldn't want things better for me more than I wanted them for myself. No one can do that for you. What I keep coming back to is this: intelligence isn't just knowing things. It's knowing when a situation has become unacceptable and being honest enough with yourself to name it. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's saying the hard thing in the room full of people you love and being willing to lose something in order to keep yourself. And resilience isn't bouncing back like nothing happened. It's walking 7/10 of a mile in the heat, making the call, missing the meeting, and still showing up the next morning with a plan. Gloria still comes over. She still has opinions. Some things don't change all the way, but she has not touched my keys since that afternoon, and I think she understands now. Not because my dad scared her, but because she finally saw that there were consequences she hadn't been accounting for. That I was not going to keep absorbing them quietly. Maisie climbed into the driver's seat of my car last week and grabbed the steering wheel with both hands and looked at me like she owned the entire road. She does. That car has always been mine, and someday I'll tell her that. I'll tell her to put her name on the things that belong to her and to notice early when someone is trying to make her feel like she's asking for too much by expecting basic respect. I'll tell her the walk was hard, but it was also the moment I finally stopped negotiating with people who were not negotiating in good faith. And I'll tell her that her grandfather drove 17 minutes and didn't ask a single unnecessary question. Because that's what love looks like when it's not trying to impress anyone.